Well, hello to you wherever you happen to be listening or watching us today on Unstoppable Mindset. Glad you're with us. I am your host, Mike Hingson. Our guest today is Jon Zieve, who is a spiritual coach. He's very passionate about helping people transform what they do and who they are, or I guess somewhat who they are. We're going to talk about that and a lot of other things. And and learn a little bit about what the whole concept of being a spiritual transformation coach is all about. And I think that'll be a lot of fun. So let's get to it. Jon, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Michael. Look forward to it.
Well, let's start like I love to do. Why don't you tell us about the early Jon growing up and stuff like that?
Yeah, early John. So I grew up in Highland Park, Illinois, suburb of Chicago. Um, and I was a big Cubs fan. I
Are you
went.
still?
I'm still a Cubs fan.
Okay, just
Absolutely.
checking. Texas,
Went to.
Texas, Texas hasn't lured you away.
It hasn't. Now, once you're a Cubs fan, you're always a Cubs fan.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, And so I went to school in Madison, Wisconsin, and I had my spiritual crisis then. I was kind of following in my father's footsteps, and um, I applied to business school, and I really enjoyed my philosophy and psychology courses much better. But I I did well, and then I just dropped out because I I didn't really have a goal that I was motivated for. I didn't have a purpose that I could really get behind. Once I got straight A's, and so I dropped out, and I just was looking for signs, anything. I was meditating. I didn't have any signs. I didn't hear anything, or at least I didn't think I did. And thus the need for a spiritual business coach back then. But then I decided to go back to school because I wasn't making any money and I had to make money. I didn't want to live at home. So went back to school, got a degree in business and had a career, a 34-year career. Had a nice career, but it wasn't really my purpose. And I knew it. I always knew it. My heart wasn't truly in it. And I got burned out. I became a workaholic and got burned out. So
Mm.
that led me to coaching. And I've been coaching for 10 years.
So when you say in college you had your spiritual crisis, is that just that you couldn't find a purpose, or what was the crisis?
The crisis was I was not aware of my motivation that time was to not let my parents down. So their expectations for me, I cared a lot about them. I didn't want them to feel disappointed.
Mm.
And my own calling, my own desires in my heart, I wasn't listening. I wasn't standing up for that. That was my spiritual crisis.
So as you progressed, how did your parents handle everything?
Oh, they were fine. My dad was disappointed, didn't understand my decision, but I went back to school and I graduated and got a good job and a good career. So, it's never what you think it is at the time, and but at the time it was a crisis.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, especially now looking back on it.
Exactly.
But but you didn't really disappoint your parents all that much.
No, I disappointed myself
Hmm.
because I didn't stand up for what I knew I wanted.
But at the time, did you really know that?
I did not.
Hmm.
Did not.
So
Right.
you you had to learn that, and it clearly took a lot of time and meditation and so on to do that. Well, tell me about your business career a little bit. Well, first of all, you went to college, you got a bachelor's, or did you go beyond that?
No, I just got a bachelor's. It was in
Okay,
business administration with a minor in marketing.
just as
Uh,
okay.
yeah, and you said tell you about your my career.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit
Yeah,
about your career and all that, if you would.
sure. So I started out in sales, and I didn't quite have the confidence, but I, I realized that if I stuck with it, I could learn it, and I failed, but I stuck with it, and there was a point where the general manager, we were on draw, 100% commission. And I was
Mm.
selling computer systems. And back then it was hardware and software. And I was selling to auto parts stores a whole like inventory system and point of sale and great company. I stayed with the same company for 34 years, but I was out of draw and I didn't sell a damn thing. And the general manager is a nice guy. He said to me, "Boy, you know what? If you leave, we're just going to have to find someone just like you. We think a lot of you. We think you could probably make it if you just hung in there. And are you willing to go in debt a little more? I already owed the company 8 grand." And he said, "We'll extend your draw if you're willing to stay." And I said, "Okay." So I kind of immediately started selling. I had the bet on myself a little bit, and that's all I needed. Once I started selling, I got confidence, and I became a VP of sales.
What changed when he made that offer to you? What changed in what you did that made you
Well,
start to sell?
I had to consciously choose to do this well. Prior to that, I was always wondering, is this what I want? Am I going to be good at this? At that point, once I made that decision, I'm going to make it happen. That's all I needed.
And so you then really put your heart into it.
Exactly.
And having been in sales my adult life, I would say at that point, the customers also sensed that in you.
Yes. Yes.
And that added value to you being successful and becoming successful.
Very,
So,
very good observation.
so what did your manager say when you started to sell? Like, see, I told you so, or
Well, I think the managers at the time, I think there's some turnover, but eventually they said, "Yeah, we knew you had it in you."
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So you sold point of sale and other computer technologies and so on, and
Hmm.
then rose through the ranks of sales. And you said you became VP of sales.
I became VP of sales and the VP of sales and marketing. And actually, prior to that, I was VP of customer service. I got a promotion to go to the company headquarters, and that took me from the Midwest to Austin, Texas.
Ah, I was going to ask you what got you to go to Texas.
Yeah, it was a promotion.
Cool.
Mhm.
So you along the way did you work to create a family or anything like that? Do you have a spouse or any
Yes,
of that stuff?
yes. I was married for 26 years and 2 kids. And now I've been married for almost, well, 4.5 years. So I got remarried in 2019.
Mm.
And together we have 7 grandkids.
Oh my gosh. Well, and of course the rule of a grandparent is to spoil the grandchildren
Exactly. Yeah,
to the consternation of the parents, but that's the rule.
that's right. It's great.
I can say that having had no grandkids, having not had children, my wife and I chose not to do that, but we also chose to spoil nieces and nephews because we knew at the end of the day we could just shoot them off to their parents.
Right, right.
Sort of the same thing as almost being a grandparent and all,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah, it is. It's a nice role.
yeah. But that's cool that you've had a number of children and they've all grown up and you've done well with that.
Hmm.
So as you went through the process, um, what did you learn that made you better as you progressed through the ranks of different positions? I'm assuming you would say you learned things along the way that helped you and that made your life better.
In my career, what did I learn?
In your career, what did you learn about your career and about life?
Yeah, just to trust my own instincts.
It's a
Yeah,
hard lesson to learn sometimes.
it is. It is. It's the most valuable thing we have. It's our intuition.
I love to talk about Trivial Pursuit, the game, and many times I've mentioned in one way or another on Unstoppable Mindset that one of the things I've observed being a person who likes to play that game is for me, although I've learned to trust more, people would be asked a question and they would give an answer. And when it was the wrong answer, they would say, and I said it for a while until I learned to trust my own brain and heart. I knew that wasn't the right answer. The right answer came to me and I just didn't believe it. So I didn't answer with that answer. And I've just seen that more with Trivial Pursuit almost than any other game that I've ever or thing that I've encountered.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
Why
Yeah.
is that? Why is it that we don't trust our instincts? Is that learned behavior or what?
Well, I believe the reason for that is when we're about 4 or 5 years old, we we believe that to be honest, we will lose a friend. So we believe that we can't be honest or we will lose a friend. So what happens is we don't build a a momentum of trusting our intuition and sharing it because we're just afraid that people won't understand us or they might react weird, and therefore we kind of shut down our intuition. That's my experience.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that. Why is it that we believe that? Are we taught that?
It's
Um,
a universal thing with kids.
uh-huh.
I've seen videos of kids and experiments with kids, and right around that age of 4 and 5, they they're afraid, to be honest. So they lie. That's how they learn how to lie. And it's not really they're not lying to others, they're lying to themselves.
Hmm.
And that's where the mistrust of our intuition comes from.
Is it something that, so it's something that's kind of, you think, innate and ingrained in them? It's not that they're taught that by elders.
Well, I'm sure they learn. I'm sure they learn from our environment. I think I read somewhere, I can't remember where, I think it might have been Edgar Casey, but the evolution of intuition, 100 years ago or longer, intuition was more valued,
Hmm.
um, especially in indigenous cultures. So I think when we started to, take kids to public schooling, there was no focus on intuition. It was all, the sciences and the other learning, and it took the focus away from that. So I think that's really another big part of it. But I also think we just don't trust being honest about what we're feeling, which intuition is a feeling, and that starts pretty young.
Where does intuition come from?
I don't think there's a right answer. I don't think we can really tell. I think it's a spiritual thing. I think it's
Hmm.
it's a communication from God.
Hmm. That would be my thought. Um, but I thought it was a question that was worth asking. And but we don't really deal with that today either, do we?
Well, it depends on the person, right?
I was thinking sort of collectively, we still
No, we
mostly don't.
don't. We
Yeah.
don't. That's a big problem. Yeah.
Yeah. We still don't want to trust our inner feelings, our intuition. And if we can't see it right out in front of us, then it can't really be true.
That is, I think, the collective consciousness, right?
How do we change that?
Well, I believe it's one person at a time, and I think the most important work we can do is to work on our shadow, which is the what blocks us from um, our brilliance, our connectivity, our intuition. It's the parts of us we don't like. Carl Jung talked a lot about the shadow. Um, he he believed that it's the there's a quote here. He said, "The best political, social, and spiritual work we can do is to withdraw the projection of our own shadow onto others."
Mm.
which is what's happening in the world. You have people that disagree with each other and they blame the other for what's in their shadow. It's all projection. Um, so how do we solve that? I believe we can't do this alone. We have to have others to support us, to help us with our shadows in a safe environment where it's safe to say this is what I'm feeling without others taking offense at that they think that they caused them to feel that way, because that's never the truth. But working together in a community or a small group of maybe eight to help each other find the hidden prejudices and biases that we have and healing those one person at a time.
Tell me a little more about this whole concept of the shadow, if you would.
Yeah, it's just the part of our self we don't like. So typically, as you grow up, we all love our parents. And typically, as a boy, there's something about our dads that we don't like. And if you're a girl, there's something about our moms we don't like. And that's what typically goes into shadow first. It's the aspect of our father, like in my case, my dad, great man, but I didn't like the fact that he worked so much. He didn't, I wanted more attention. I wanted to play baseball in the backyard with him, but he was always working. And so I didn't like the fact that he was a workaholic. So guess what? I put that in my shadow.
And by that, you mean,
That means I I didn't want to be that way. So when I grew up and I looked to role models, I looked at my dad and I said I didn't want to be that, but I became him because I put this part of me, I tried to hide it. I tried to deny that I was that. And when you do that, you're hiding from yourself. And so the shadow work means that I faced the truth that I was like my dad. I looked like him. I mean, I was like my dad, and by resisting that part of him, I was resisting a part of me. And then if I had been more conscious of that, I would have made different choices and not become a workaholic like my dad.
so the shadow really kind of hid your ability, well, maybe not ability, but hid you really analyzing and thinking more about yourself in that regard.
Yeah, I was in denial that I was a workaholic
Mm-hmm.
because I had sworn not to be. And I think a lot of people listening will agree that there's some aspect of their parents that they just swore they weren't going to do that. And then when they realize it, they are that. And that's the best definition of the shadow I can come up with is we desperately don't want to be that so much we become it.
I'm thinking of something sort of a little bit different, um, but I think it's fascinating. I want to ask it anyway. Um, a lot of people have alcoholic relatives or friends, and they
Mhm.
become alcoholics. Is that the same sort of concept?
It's exactly the same. Yeah, exactly the same. So let me give you a couple examples. These are easy examples. Projection is when our ego is trying to protect us from feeling a certain way. And we project what's in our unconscious onto others. So in school, everyone is used to the classroom bully, right? There's always a bully somewhere. The bully teases other kids for like being quick to cry, right?
Yeah.
But that's because he's quick to cry. So he's the one that doesn't like that about himself. That's why he's bullying others, because he's tried to hide that from himself. And he can't acknowledge that he's quick to cry, so he blames others and he's critical of them. That's a great example of what
Mm.
of how the shadow and the ego won't allow him to know that that's the truth about him, because he's trying to identify with something, an identity that is inconsistent with crying.
Is there something in addition to the ego that becomes the contributor to the shadow, I would say? Is there something else that's trying to say, no, what you're thinking isn't right, but we just ignore it?
Um, I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you
Okay,
repeat it?
so the ego for the bully won't let him acknowledge that it's really his problem that he doesn't want to cry, or that
Right,
but he's a quick crier.
right.
And so he bullies. Is there something else that is trying to help him counteract that?
Well, the ego is the problem. So whenever we try to protect ourselves, that's when we put stuff in shadow. The counteract it is to actually access the shadow. And that's where our power lies. So if the bully actually spent time feeling, if he said to his ego, okay, ego, I see you, I hear you, you want to protect me from feeling embarrassed or whatever. I'm not having it. I want you to sit down, ego, and I'm going to feel whatever it is I'm really feeling. And I'm going to cry or whatever that embarrassment is that he's feeling. If he was to do that, that counteracts, and now it doesn't get hidden in the shadow.
So, kind of the intuition is the antithesis, if you will, of the ego.
Yes. If
Okay,
we can trust what we're feeling and not judge it, that helps fight the ego.
got it. And I appreciate it and I understand it. And, we don't listen to ourselves nearly enough collectively anyway. Um,
Right.
I just finished, and it will be published later this year, a book about learning to control fear. And it came out of surviving the World Trade Center and recognizing that I wasn't afraid, but it wasn't until 2020, I guess, when the pandemic hit and I started to really think about and talk about this, that I realized I had created a mindset that said, you know what to do if there's an emergency, because I spent the time preparing not only to know what to do, but I think also preparing to create a mindset and learning that I had control over how I dealt with things. I might not be able to control the specific thing that was happening, like the World Trade Center attack, but I could control how I dealt with it. Um, and at least mentally, even if not totally physically, but mostly physically too, but mentally, I had the choice of how I wanted to deal with it. And
Mhm.
my makeup, and I think I learned it a lot from my parents, was to be more of a teacher and more of a person who had confidence in themselves, not in an egotistical or negative way, but in a self respecting way to say, I know what to do. And that works. So we just finished the book, Live Like a Guide Dog, stories of a blind man and his dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and walking forward in faith. And it will be out later this year. And it's all about controlling fear, and
Mhm.
recognizing that there's a lot of value in introspection. And if you do that and you ask yourself the hard questions and are willing to listen to yourself and the answers, you can move forward.
I love that. I'm curious about fear because I believe I read this in a book and I truly believe it's true. The definition of fear. What is your definition of fear? And I'll tell you what I think
No,
it
you go
is.
ahead.
It's the absence of love.
It could be. I think I don't know that I would say that fear is totally the absence of love. I think that fear is an emotion and a physical reaction. And I would not ever tell someone that they should be unafraid. You shouldn't have fear. That's not the issue. The issue is that fear can be a very powerful tool that you use to focus and to direct you. It becomes part of your intuition. It becomes part of you in your mind. Um, but it's a reactionary thing. And
Hmm.
I think for most of us, we don't learn to talk to that reactionary thing and control it. I know Mark Twain and others have made comments about we're afraid of so many things every single day, and most of them will never come true
Hmm.
because we haven't learned to step back or step in, perhaps, to our minds and say, wait a minute, let's really talk about this. And the more of that that we do, the more that we really lean into addressing our mind and talking about this fear that something in us thinks that we have that may or may not truly be realistic, the more we talk about it, the better our muscle that will help us control it can take effect. Um, but I will never say don't be afraid. I will say you can control fear.
Hmm. I like it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I agree with what you're saying. I think fear is a message to us,
Mm-hmm.
that it's something, if we're really afraid of it, there's something there for us. If we can lean into that fear and feel it fully and let it guide us in a way, it can be a power, as you said, a very powerful tool for us.
Yeah, and we have to take control of it and tell it to guide us, not overwhelm us, or as I put it, blind
Right.
us, because
Yes.
that's what usually happens because we haven't learned to take any control of fear. But when we do, it helps us be much more powerful within ourselves and probably to others. I keep thinking of things like military SEAL teams, Rangers, and so on. I think that they, if they were honest, would not say to you, they're not afraid of going into situations, but they've learned to control that fear and harness it and use it in a positive and wise way.
Completely agree. Yep.
And I think that's what we really need to deal with. So
Yeah.
I've
Sounds like a great book.
Well, I'm looking forward to it coming out, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. It is actually available for pre-order, and I think it will be a lot of fun for people to read. And it's going to come out before our political election, and I'm glad
Mm,
about that because I hope people will read it and maybe start to take to heart that we have to really step back and not just let the fear that a lot of politicians try to promote overwhelm us, that we really need to step back and look at what's real and what's not real.
mm. Love it.
We'll see. So, what made you finally step away from a successful 34-year business career? I mean, clearly you wanted to go on, but what was the thing that finally made you step away? Because you've been doing it a long time.
Yeah, well, I couldn't do it anymore. Like I told several people, I just can't. Like my whole body was resisting the thought of continuing to do what I knew in my heart wasn't my purpose.
Mm.
And it showed up in terms of my energy level, my stress level. So I just said I have to follow my body here, and I need to change course. And I knew I would be a good coach, so I became certified, and I opened up a business.
Tell me about becoming certified. What was involved in that and how did all that work for you?
Well, there was a lot of different certifications I received. I started out with a life coach certification, Then I went to an organization in Northern California called the Heart Math Institute, which has been studying the heart for 30 plus years. And then I went through their graduate program. Um, and then I did other certifications in energy work, um, shamanism, um, and then eventually I became certified in what's called the Hartman Value Profile, which is the assessment I use today as a coach, which I think is fascinating. And it actually leads into your question about, what do we do about this collective uh, consciousness, which is not tuned into our intuition? Well, this assessment was created for that purpose. Can I share that a little story about the guy that created it? Would that be okay?
Uh-huh. And
So his name was Robert Hartman. Actually, that's not his real name. He lived in Nazi Germany, and in the early 30s, he was a judge actually, and he was trying Nazis before the war, but he became outspoken and he needed to leave, otherwise he would have been killed.
hmm
So he left, he escaped, and he had this question because of his experience there. If evil can organize the way it did in Nazi Germany, how do we organize good? So he created this assessment and he became a philosophy professor. And he created the science of morality. And he thought this is what the world needs, is to have a science of morality, to know what's right and wrong, and how to make judgments, how to value, what to value, and how to make the right judgments or choices. So um, that's the assessment we use, and it's fascinating to me. Everybody that takes it, it only takes about 15 to 20 minutes to take, but they get back a very unique assessment that tells you if you it doesn't compare you to anyone else, which most assessments do. It's not a personality assessment, but what it does is it compares you to how mathematically, if you were to think about values perfectly to make the perfect decision, how do you compare to that? And then it shows where you have the opportunity for more awareness. And it typically, that lack of awareness is where the shadows reside.
hmm
So that's what I use. And it's a great way to introduce the need to do shadow work with clients that are interested in that. And I coach business people. I'm not just doing this for anyone. I'm helping business people to get better at whatever it is they're trying to do by being more moral and making better value judgments.
Now, if I recall, one of the things that you provided was a link to the test.
Yeah, I think I did provide that with you.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's unique because you're not comparing to other people. What makes it unique?
That's it. It's most assessments are comparing you to others and they create, like a norm and they compare you to the norm. This is not that. It's based on math. This guy was a mathematician and he studied uh he actually created the science of formal axiology, it's called, which is the study of values.
hmm
Um, And so with that 15 to 20 minutes, you get this 20 page, an 18 to 20 page report, and it's got a graph, and I review that with people. Um, it usually takes about 25 to 30 minutes to review it. And then if they're curious about how to optimize their strengths, then they can we can talk about what coaching would look like, and then they can try coaching.
So what do your clients say to you, and what do they think about the whole idea of coaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. So most of my clients say that what coaching does for them is that they're they don't know what to do about something about their business, and they want essentially they want clarity. Because once you get the clarity, then you kind of know what to do. It's easy to take action. So most of my clients, they use it to help them get clarity. And then it's just like it's clockwork. Once they get the clarity, it's really easy. But if not, they're stuck.
Mhm.
And then I teach them some tools that they can use to help them with their energy and to communicate better to first themselves by listening to their inner voice and then with others.
Coaching is something that someone undertakes because they believe that there is something that they need to learn or whatever. But do you think that most people just are still uncomfortable with the idea of going off and seeking coaching because of, again, partly the whole issue of honesty? They don't want to be honest with themselves, but also the whole issue of, um, um, I grew up, I know me, I don't need someone else to tell me.
Yeah, there's definitely there's fear involved, right?
That's
Fear of
probably a
not
better way to put
knowing.
it.
Yeah, there's fear about, not knowing what the process, are they up for it? Do they have the time for it? There's a bunch of fears. If I pay the money, am I going to get the value out of it? But essentially, if they if they can be, like you said, if they can be honest, and a lot of people don't like to ask for help.
Yeah,
They feel that that's a big, flaw.
it's
No,
a
I would never
weakness.
ask for help. It's a weakness. But the truth is, we can't really fulfill our potential alone. We need people to help us. Look at any sports team. If you listen to them, the athletes talk about their success, they will inevitably talk about a coach who was honest with them and challenged them to address something that was preventing them from being great. And they all tell the same story. They needed someone that really believed in them, even more so than they believed in them. And with that belief, eventually they can create their own belief in themselves. And then, of course, work on what they need to work on. And that's what a coach does. So who wouldn't want a coach?
Yeah, and it is something that makes perfect sense, because the whole idea, it seems to me, of a coach is you're seeking, if you're looking at coaches or even talking about it, you're seeking knowledge that you don't think that you possess. And probably if you could look deep enough, you already do possess it. But if a coach can help bring that out because they have different ways of doing it, that makes perfect sense too.
Right. You're right about that. Typically, they have all the answers, but in a lot of cases, they don't trust the answers. It goes back to your trivial pursuit analogy. I just didn't trust it. So, how can we help people? We can help them trust these intuitive hits and start to act on it. And then once it's like me selling, once I actually committed to, okay, I'm going to prove I can do this. Once I made that change from I'm not sure to I'm committed, that's what happens with coaching because you got to commit money. And that
Yeah.
act of commitment makes a huge difference in your results.
But even more than committing money, although that's a big part of it because we value money and we know that if we're committing it, then we need to do something to justify it. But even more than committing money is committing the mindset
Right,
to seeking it.
right. It's committing to whatever that goal is that we're committing to.
Yeah.
If we don't have that commitment, people can tell, like you said about me prior to me making that commitment in my sales career, people can feel your energy. they can tell if you're confident. They can tell if you're in this for the long haul, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the same with coaching. Once you go from lack of clarity and not fully committed to committed and you know what you're committed to, things get a much easier.
Yeah. Um, Once you make the commitment and you really allow yourself to open up and tell that ego to relax,
Hmm.
then you're able to really start to move forward.
Correct.
So, what exactly is a spiritual business coach? I mean, there are a lot of different kinds of coaches. You talked about different certifications you had, a life coach and other kinds of coaches. And so, what is a spiritual business coach?
Yeah. So for me, a spiritual coach is someone who guides us to uncover the parts of ourselves that prevent us from realizing our full potential and how we want others to treat us. So I'll give you a couple examples. Um, if we're honest and we ask ourselves, do our loved ones, do they pay as much attention to our feelings, or do they engage with us the way we want them to engage with us? And some people would answer yes. Some people would answer no. And the people that answer no, a spiritual coach can help them realize how we are actually contributing to that challenge, how we're training people to not pay attention to us.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because here's an example. If I was to ask you, Michael, how do you feel? And you said, fine. And I knew, because I'm intuitive, I knew you weren't fine, then you're kind of training me to not ask you again,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's what we do when we're not aware of some of these shadows that we have of not being honest with ourselves and others. So a spiritual coach helps you get to the root of that and to work with your shadows, shine light on them, and then integrate them so that when the next time somebody asks you, how do you feel? You say, well, you know what? I'm feeling sad
Mm-hmm.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And then guess what? They start asking you more and more, how do you feel? And you go deeper and deeper. And that's, I think, what everybody wants is they want to have more intimacy in terms of connection with others.
But it might very well be that somebody really does feel fine too.
That could be. That could very well be. Yes. Yeah.
But it's a matter of really knowing how to interpret and understand whether that's really true or not.
Right. Well, we know those of us that are intuitive, we know if people are telling the truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? We can tell just by their body language, by the tone,
Mm-hmm.
we can tell.
Yeah. I mean, I can sit here and say I feel fine, and I do, but I also know that there are a lot of uncertainties in life, and there are challenges, and I need to work on. Now that my wife has passed, it's just me, so I can feel lonesome, and I will admit that it doesn't stop me from feeling fine about me, but I can feel lonesome, and I can feel like it'd be
Mhm.
more fun to have um, other time with people. But I think for me personally, I'm pretty good about being honest concerning all of that. And I think that it is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah. So, my role is to help people that they scratch their head wondering, why do people react a certain way around me or towards me?
Yeah.
Um, do some people not talk to you and they don't tell you why? Or do you want to change something in your life, but you have no idea how? That's where a spiritual coach can help.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
For me, and I think other people who are blind, of course, there's an inherent fear that we've been taught about dealing with someone who has a disability, and we collectively as a society don't include them a lot of times in the conversation. But I think it's important for us who happen to be blind or who happen to have other typical disabilities, and I'll explain that in a second, but to recognize that We're different. We're okay, but we need to be part of the solution of getting people to understand and learn that we're not any worse or any less than they are.
Right. I totally agree. We're all equal. Everyone is equal. That's the goal.
Well, and I said typical disability because, and I've said it here before, I am of the opinion that everyone on this planet has a disability. For most of you, it's light dependence. You don't do well without light.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
we've covered up your disability because we've provided so many different ways to have light on demand. It
Right.
doesn't change the fact that the disability is there. So um, I've kind of started to work to get people to understand that disability is a characteristic that we all have and it manifests itself in different ways. And that we shouldn't think less of someone whose way of disability manifests differently than theirs to think that that person is less than they are.
Hmm. Great, great way to think about life and people.
It is a challenge, however. So, we we do have to to deal with it.
Hmm.
How does someone know they need to have a spiritual coach or a spiritual business coach?
Well, like I was just saying, if you're scratching your head wondering why are people reacting to me the way they are? Why do I get triggered?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another one is I don't want to just exist. I want to really live fully, and I feel like I'm just existing. Those are good
Mm.
signs of how a spiritual coach can help. They want to change something, but they just don't know how to get started. Um, Maybe they're not clear on their vision or their purpose. That's how you know.
Do you make God a part of the spiritual coach journey that people take?
Yes.
And I ask that because, there are a lot of people who talk about God and spiritualness and they talk about it, but deep down they don't necessarily really believe it. I went to a church for a number of years with my wife and I, and the pastor had a very interesting observation. He said that people in the church would read about spirituality and God and so on, but when it truly intellectually came time to accept it, they just weren't there. And, so I'm wondering how many people knock the idea of it being a spiritual coach.
Well, it just so happens that the people that I work with are open for that.
Ah,
I don't, I think that's the way the universe works.
mm-hmm.
I don't feel like I'm in control of who I coach. I feel like there's other divine guidance or intelligence that's orchestrating things. And so if somebody's not open to that, it's not a good match.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be as valuable to someone if they're not open to, um, how they can pray for answers, or it's not about religion. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
it's not at all. It's more about a personal relationship with a higher power.
And I think you said something very interesting. I absolutely agree. You shouldn't be in control of the people you coach. That's a whole different story, but you shouldn't be.
Right,
You're a guide, you're a counselor, you're a
right,
person to help them. But uh, ultimately, they're the ones that have to learn to really, really take control.
correct.
So
Yeah.
when you're when you're dealing with people in business, how does a spiritual coach help? And how is what they do maybe different than other kinds of coaches?
Yeah, well, you can't really separate the individual from the business. So what I find is when it comes down to what is your vision for the business, what is your mission, what are your values? Um, that's that's what makes a good business really create the culture that is going to create the success in terms of client satisfaction, in terms of employee satisfaction, retention. It's all about the culture. So it's all about their vision and mission, and that comes from asking for help to receive these messages. What is my vision? What is my mission? And if somebody truly wants that help, they will get it. And then they have to trust it. That's the difficult part. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
listen and they hear it, but they don't, okay, I can't possibly put that in action. How do I do that? That's where I can help them because I've got several clients that have executed this, that have taken, they've proven it works, and they just need that encouragement and even talking to some of my clients about it. Um, the more you trust just being yourself and not trying to be anything but that, and trust your intuition and trust your feelings and your heart, that's that's being spiritual.
Yeah. And it's something that we just don't get taught nearly enough or often enough to listen. I used to say, well, I always record my speeches when I travel and speak, and I used to say I do that because I'm my own worst critic, and I want to listen to them. And if
Mm-hmm.
if anybody can find the problems that need to be dealt with, I am. But I've realized in the last actually year and a half, and just thinking about it, I've been approaching it wrong and saying it wrong. I'm not my own worst critic. I'm my own best teacher, and it's a much more positive and relevant way to look at things
Mm-hmm.
because in reality, I am my own best teacher. You can't teach me anything in the world. You can offer me information, but I really have to teach myself and I have to intellectually learn it and accept what you have to say.
Yep, I agree. So, a lot of businesses will say that their employees are not fully engaged or they're in it for themselves. And I experienced that in my corporate career. A spiritual coach can help the leader to really get clear with the help of their leadership team of what that vision and mission and purpose is. And then it's up to the employees to decide, are you committed to this?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not, then you're probably not the right person for the job. But once they commit, then they're not out for themselves anymore. They're part of this solution. And that's how spiritual coaching can help a team.
And that's exactly what it is. It's all about the team.
Mm-hmm.
And so often we just don't recognize that at all, but we are really all part of a team and
Yep.
we need to really deal with that and recognize it. I love team building and teamwork. I think that it's one of the most important things that we all can learn. When I've written, now this will be my third book, I love to collaborate. I've worked with a second person on every one of the books, and I think it's enhanced it because what I
Mm-hmm.
discover is what their strengths are and what my strengths are. And if the two of us need a strength from somewhere else, we'll go find it. But mostly it is that between us, we have to learn how to use our individual strengths to make the team work better.
Agree 100%.
And
Yeah.
we can do that.
Yep. Absolutely. The sum is greater than the individual parts.
Yeah, it is absolutely true. And there's no reason that we can't learn to be better people on a team. It is a challenge sometimes. And again, it gets back to, are we really willing to look at what the team can offer, or are we going to get back into an ego issue again?
Right. Right.
And I, for one, just would rather stay away from the egos.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so what would you, if you had some final things that you'd like to impart to people about all of this and so on, what would you like people to take away today?
I guess what I'd like people to take away is if they're curious about how to live life more fully, um, have more meaning, deeper connections, then encourage your listeners to take the assessment and invest the 15 to 20 minutes in taking it, and then invest 30 minutes in getting it reviewed. And I'm going to offer that for free. Um, and then just be curious about how they can, with a magic wand, what would they do that they're not doing, and see if coaching is for them. Explore it.
Well, I hope people will take advantage of it. I mean, even if um, you end up being fine, it's still worth exploring. And I personally am of the belief that no matter what we do, we're always learning and we'll learn something from everything that goes on around us.
I agree.
So I hope people will take advantage of it. I want to thank you for being here. What is the name of your business?
The name of I work with Pro Advisor Coach, and
Okay.
my personal LLC is called Jon Zieve Coaching.
JON
ZIEVE.com.
ZIEVE
Yeah, yeah,
coaching.com.
right.
So if people want to reach out to you, best to go to the website, or how can they do that?
Yeah, they can go to my website. It has my contact information on there. They can I have like a thing where they can text me that they want to take the assessment, and then I'll respond saying send me your email and I'll send you the link to take it.
Okay, now you also, I think, did provide the link so they can go to click on the link as
They can
well.
click right on the link and then get the assessment, and then I believe I have my calendar link on there to schedule time to review it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, great. I hope people will reach out. I think it's absolutely was worth it and is worth it. And I value a lot of the insights that you've given us. And I hope people will likewise appreciate this and maybe use it as a way to step forward. You offer a lot of great advice and great knowledge that will help us all. So thank you very much for being here to do that.
Thanks, Michael, for having me on. And I appreciate what you're doing with your podcast and the books you're writing and just your story. You're a very inspiring guy.
Well, thank you. Well, I appreciate all of you listening wherever you are. Would love it if you'd give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening or watching us today on YouTube. Please give us a 5-star rating. We value that and we value your input. So please feel free to review us. We would love it. And if you'd like to reach out to me, and I hope you will, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to do so by email, michaelhi@accessibe.com. That's MICHAELHI at accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com. Or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Michael Hingson is MICHAELHINGSON. So love to hear from you, though. Want your thoughts, love your reviews, and would really appreciate those 5-star ratings. By the way, I've mentioned it before, as a speaker, I am always willing to talk with anyone who might want to hire a speaker to come and talk about, in my case, my experiences at the World Trade Center or inclusion and diversity, talk about leadership, the fact that I've had a multi-decade career in sales and have a lot of insights to share. Would love to do that, and always looking for speaking opportunities. And we're also looking for podcast guests. So Jon, for you and all of you listening, if you know someone who you think would be a good guest for us, love to hear from you or love to hear from them. So please feel free to refer anyone or introduce us to anyone who might be a good guest. And again, one last time, Jon, I want to thank you for being here with us and for making this a very enjoyable and I think very fruitful episode of Unstoppable Mindset.
Thanks, Michael. Bless you.